that's your recording meeting. Okay. We will do roll call in alphabetical order. Cheryl Caruana. Here. Tim Collins.
Present.
Sean Kennedy.
Here.
Lisa Murray. Here. Rich Rediker.
He will be here, I believe, at 6:30.
He's not here, right?
Yeah, he's not here now. He'll be here at 6:30.
Right. Mike Terabasi.
I'm here.
Michelle Boudreaux here. If you please stand. Cheryl will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Behind
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our MASC representative is running a little bit behind. They are stuck in traffic, so we are going to take a look at the questions, candidate questions for our interview later, so if everyone has a moment and is able to look those over. Everyone should have also received a copy last week of the questions that the screening committee asked of candidates, so you also have those for your reference. So the hope is if you look at the questions and you decide which question you'd like to ask, and then that way we can order them and make that decision so we're prepared for the candidate interview at 6:30.
So I was part of the selection process, and with the first candidate, we improvised a question which we proceeded to ask every candidate, and I liked it a lot, and I thought we would bring that one, the question about that this assistant superintendent role is a, what did I say? It was a...
I think you asked about how it fit into their career trajectory.
Yeah, but I think the superintendent role is kind of a...
Kitchen sink.
Kitchen sink, right, a kitchen sink of all different kinds of responsibilities, hats to wear, different roles and jobs. And I asked them how this job would fit into their career path. And I think that was probably we got some really good feedback, some really good information from that question. I would like to ask that question. I would like to ask that question again.
Okay. Does anyone else have an idea of what they would like to ask?
Do we know how many years he has in the Mass Teachers Retirement System?
Oh.
You know, I'm curious about the age, how many years he has in the retirement system, and then how many years left. You know.
I would just say that age can't be a factor in employment decisions.
So both of those would be headed in that direction. So I guess we're not doing that now.
Correct.
Your questions do not have to come from this list. If there's a question that you would like to ask that's not on this list, just make sure that we know what it is. So we can write it down and just make sure that we're not asking redundant questions.
And also, this is something I learned at the MASC when I was talking to other superintendents and school committees about their finance. You know, it seems that it's a trend right now that you're lucky if you get 3-5 years out of a finance person. They seem to be bopping around a lot more. So I just kind of thought that we got Aaron for what, 4 or 5? 4. I think we had Aaron for 4 years, right?
Somewhere that way.
Yeah. Which is pretty much in line what I'm seeing from everyone else. Not that, of course we can be different and better and whatever, but just throwing that out there.
I'm almost ready with the question.
I will be beginning with just welcoming them and asking them just to tell us a little bit about themselves and what brought them here tonight before we begin with all the other committee questions. So anyway, our representative is here. We will get her a moment to set up. But if everyone can continue just taking a look, and we will revisit this later in the agenda.
Just a quick point of order, because 2 candidates were recommended, one decided is no longer under consideration. consideration, so there's only one candidate left, does that give us more leeway? Because it's not like we have to, before whatever question you ask, you have to ask every single candidate, right? You have to be fair. But since there's only one candidate, would it be more appropriate to go off script a little bit if we had other questions?
You can ask anything that you want.
Okay.
But if we had multiple candidates, you would just, whatever you ask the first. And the thing is, you can ask follow-up questions if somebody gave an answer and you're looking for more information. You can certainly follow up at any time, but it's more of making sure that each interview, it's uniform, so and it's fair that everyone's being asked the same questions.
And Michelle, one last quick one. So let's say I ask a question and then you're going, I don't like, or I don't think he answered the second part of the question and I'd like a little more. Could you say, hey, listen, I'd like some more?
Clarifying.
Perfect.
Sure, absolutely.
Perfect.
Yep.
Excellent.
Yeah. Okay, so we are going to welcome our MASC representative, Liz Bond here. We thank you for being with us tonight.
Sorry about technical. Thank you. Are you going to click?
Yes.
Oh, great.
So there's a microphone for you there.
Hi, thank you.
And if you just make sure that you press the button, when the green light is on, that way the camera can pick up the sound. Perfect. Thank you.
Sorry about that. I was stuck at the light coming through the, I don't know what to call it, the old rock bridge, the underpass, for like 11 minutes until somebody in front of me finally made a quick U-turn and I could get around and get into the CBS parking lot. Anyway, the lights just never turned on.
Accident on Boston Road.
That's what Michelle said, yeah. So thank you for having me back here. It's always a pleasure. I thought coming from Greenfield it would take me, Granby, it would take me about 15 or 20 minutes, and it ended up taking me about 40, so I apologize for that. Do you want me to jump right in?
Yeah.
So may I ask first who's new and new? Thank you for doing this work. I am finding every week that it is getting harder and harder, the work. And for the superintendents, John knows how difficult it's getting to be. I actually took the dive and joined the Granby School Committee after moving there in August because they had a vacancy that no one was willing to step up and fill. I joined the school committee Monday night, and another member left the school committee, which I guess she was planning to do as soon as someone else joined. At the time,
Thank you for your service.
well, thank you, because the time commitment is bigger than we think. It's not just attending meetings, right? It's paying attention to the laws, things that change, the way we should do things. I know you were at the conference, professional learning, that kind of thing. So it's all a process, like everything in life. I want to talk a little bit, it's kind of a refresher for most of you because I know I've met you before. Give you some updates on things that have happened and so that your new member just has this sort of a 101 on roles and responsibilities and important things we need to know. I'm here tonight. Let's go right to the roles and responsibilities. There we go. So I guess we skipped over the municipal legislatures for schools, but you all know by now that you've been elected to this board by members of the community, and you make decisions on behalf of the school. You are an independent board from every other town body, and therefore you are the municipal legislature for the schools. Along with that great authority comes great responsibility, right? We have to remember all the time that our main focus is the students in the schools here. and what can be provided to them so that they can continue to grow and achieve great things as they move on through school and on into life. We're going to give an overview of roles and responsibilities. We're going to talk about relationships in general, but relationships with the chair and the superintendent, relationships with district staff, school committee policies, agendas, meeting minutes, and we're going to touch a little bit on subcommittees. I've actually found more and more as new members come on board, there's less and less of an understanding of how and why subcommittees exist. So I think it's important to include that tonight. We always like to talk about, just quickly, about what it is to run for office, right? And sort of how you interact with constituents, members of the public, and how you can sort of take a platform, make promises, talk about what you will and will not do. And you pretty quickly find out when you join the committee that you're not going to do much at all if you don't build a healthy relationship with the other members of the committee, right? Because it takes a majority of the board to do anything. I find that to be the most, Josh Dixon. Sorry, I just realized.
Yes, I thought that was the most Josh Dixon too. I agree with you.
John, how did
We
you?
got him.
Wow, are you
We
guys
never stop looking for talent.
lucky? Wowza. Nice to see you again. So anyway, we find out sitting at the board table that we come here with all sorts of, with different backgrounds, often different ideas of the things we might like to accomplish. I know that I found myself in that position when I served on the school committee in Hatfield, and I'm going to find it again in Granby, because I have an awful lot to learn about Granby and how Granby operates. And the first thing I can do to get there is to try to build relationships with my colleagues on the board. We learn that we can't fulfill any of the promises we might have made to our constituents when we were running for election without getting our fellow board members literally on board with those ideas, right? And we understand that we have a very limited knowledge set about the laws and regulations that govern the work that the committee does. You're fortunate to be working with some seasoned members here who have built good relationships with one another over the years, and I'm sure that'll be helpful. So roles and responsibilities of the school committee fit into 4 large buckets of work, and they are large buckets of work. That's goal setting for the district. We'll talk a little bit about each of these areas as we go through. Policy setting and adoption. Very limited authority around personnel and budget. So the authority you have around personnel is hiring and evaluating the superintendent. The superintendent is
Aaron, you're 2 ahead.
Oh, it's on the
Sorry.
the superintendent is the only employee of the district fortunate enough to be able to be evaluated under the scrutiny of the public eye. That's tongue-in-cheek, of course. It's always a fun time, isn't it, John?
It is interesting.
It is interesting. So we don't have much on that here tonight. That's a whole separate section about that sort of process that evolves over time, begins with goal setting with the superintendent, understanding how those goals are woven through your strategic plan here in the district, and how you're going to evaluate those goals. So we know that those are your 4 buckets because that's what Mass General Law tells us. And you really don't have, they're extremely limited, if any, authority outside of those areas. As a team, effective school committees, we know from the research Set a vision for not only the district, but for how they work together. They're accountable, they hold themselves accountable, and they hold the superintendent accountable through the evaluation system. They build strong relationships. We don't always have to agree with one another's philosophies on the work here at the board, but we do have to sometimes agree to disagree, accept the will of the board, and move forward with the work. Our work involves looking at an awful lot of data. If you don't understand the data, and I'm sure we don't have any difficulties asking for deeper explanations of what you're looking at here so that you know how to, this all ties back into the superintendent evaluation. Any data basically that you see throughout the year essentially will tie back into the superintendent evaluation. We need to look at data to understand how our students are performing. Fortunately, for students going forward, I think, in my opinion, and I know everybody doesn't share it with me, but students no longer have to score a certain level on the MCAS in order to graduate high school, right? They have to meet district-determined measures of success in graduating. I think that's how it's always meant to be. That doesn't mean the district will still be held accountable for those scores. I'm sure DESE will find many ways to do that in the future going forward. So it's important for us to collaborate here at the board level to give the superintendent the authority, the ability, and the leeway to work with his staff in the best way possible. He's busy building relationships across the district every day. And things would not be working so well here if he was not doing a very good job at that. So all of that work leads us to a certain amount of trust and respect for one another as board members. We may not end up being the best of friends at the end of the day, but we can sit at the table together and do the work that's necessary to give our students what they need. You're fortunate here in Wilbraham that the community does also agree with you in terms of serving the students and funding what needs to be funded here, so congratulations on that. You are clearly doing some things right to have the trust of the community so that they can, in fact, fund things that the kids need. Sorry, I shouldn't be calling them kids, they're students, and young people, some not so young. Affected school committees focus their meetings on student outcomes. We also say, that's the next slide, please. Student achievement is the sort of word of choice for most people. I think student outcomes is a more well-rounded term. It gives us an idea of the different kinds of things we're providing students. It's not only about academic achievement. It's about how students participate in other activities in the school. It's about community involvement of students and a number of other areas. That is easily accomplished by aligning the work of the committee to the goals that have been established through the strategic planning and superintendent's goal-setting process. Keep an eye on that product at your meetings. John, when you do agendas and something that you talk about ties directly back to your agenda, do you let the committee know that through the agenda?
Typically, my report is a status update of how progress is being made towards the strategic plan.
Right. As it should be. The committee also governs itself through setting protocols in terms of how you all will treat and address one another at meetings, how the work will flow at meetings. And you can, effective school committees also periodically take a step back and evaluate the work that they have done together and how that has worked out. You attend professional development so that you can keep up to date on sort of what's happening, what's new, what do we want to learn more about. I think one of the best pieces of that conference, and you may or may not agree with me, is the networking that you get to do. And you find out that the problems that you have in Hamden, Wilbraham, are not just Hamden, Wilbraham concerns, right? They're concerns of folks across the state. And it's great to build that network of people that you can reach out to and have conversations with, so that sometimes you don't feel so alone anymore. The roles and responsibilities of the committee and superintendent are really quite, go back, please, Aaron, one more. They're really quite clear, and they're spelled out in the law. The committee's role is governance. You set a mission and vision, you set goals for the district through the strategic plan, and then you sit together with the superintendent to talk about what goals are most important to achieve in any academic year, so that you can continue to work that, move that work of the strategic plan forward. You set a budget. Budget is considered essentially a policy document because you fund what you have said you believe is important in the district. And you establish and ensure that policies are being followed so that those goals in that budget work is being implemented across the district the way you intended it to be. When's the last time you did a policy review here? Do you do regular policy review work?
We completely updated the policy book last year, and we were looking at all those Section A policies that came out in August, I think it was,
Yes.
related to Title IX.
Title
That'll be
IX.
the next bit we take on.
Well, hang on, we'll be doing Title IX again soon in the future. Fortunately for us here in Massachusetts, the Massachusetts Constitution provides greater security for students around a number of issues than the federal government will. So we'll see some changes to Title IX, but our students will be in a better position than many other students in other states. So the committee provides the means by which the district can function. You serve as a bridge between the community and the superintendent. You're hearing more often from folks out in the community about any range of topics. The superintendent, and many of those topics are complaints. I love it when people make a point to make a compliment about something good that's happened or something that their kids are particularly enjoying in school, although it tends to be in the minority of folks we hear from. It's because when people are happy, they're not taking the time to talk to you. So by and large, most people are quite happy with things that are going on in the district. The superintendent's office hears every day when people are not quite so happy. Erin probably spends a good part of her day fielding most of those calls and actually resolving many of the concerns that are raised before they even have to get to the superintendent. So the superintendent is your CEO. He creates the strategies, action plans, the goals, spells out regulation for how policy and budget will be implemented across the district, also known as procedures for how to get things done. He's essentially the bridge between the staff and the committee. And we'll talk a bit more specifically about that. He recommends, so recommendations come from the superintendent to the committee on almost all of the work we do, starting with the budget, policy, goals, and I would imagine the mission and vision for the district as well. You are, as I look over at John, I've known John for 25 or 30 years. And you've got yourself a good one who really cares about the work. So congrats on that too. To further understand the roles, next slide please, Aaron. You all can stop me anytime you want. I know most of you have heard this, which is probably why you're not. The committee's power is exercised only through action taken by the full board at properly posted meetings. You govern through policy. You govern through the financial resources that you approve for the district. And you engage with the community. Sometimes here, most often out in the community, outside publicly posted meetings. We will talk about public comment, but I want to just take a moment to say, I know that I oftentimes was tempted when I heard from constituents about particular concerns they had to sort of be a middleman. And that is absolutely the worst thing as school committee members that we can do. The best thing that we can do is understand what the chain of command is, and to refer people to the most appropriate person first in that chain to begin to resolve their concerns. Oftentimes when you have those conversations early on, it's parents, the main thing you probably hear is, we are afraid of retaliation, we don't want to speak up. Well, that is a complete misnomer, because nobody in a public school district is going to retaliate against a student because a parent has a concern. I feel fairly confident in saying that. We're all here for the right reasons. Sometimes there are things that might not be known to everybody that can be resolved in the best interest of a student. Sometimes there are things that cannot be changed for a specific student, but it's always good to have that interaction with the family. If we have more interaction at the district level with families, I would say that a lot of things in the district would run more smoothly. We don't exist, the work doesn't happen in a school district in a vacuum. So remember, as tempted as you may be to help somebody out and go directly to the superintendent with an issue, there's a chain of command for a reason. And the superintendent is really the last stop in any sort of concern that's raised. And you want the leaders that work with the superintendent to be able to resolve those things before they get to that level. That's why they work here. You work very hard to sustain that relationship with the superintendent and the committee and your fellow members. It doesn't always happen organically. And you have the distinction of being, while you have no direct supervision over any other employees besides the superintendent, you are in fact, by law, the employer of record for every employee in the district. So by building effective relationships among yourself and with the superintendent, it's one of the best things you can do to keep yourself out of trouble. Because if anything ever does go wrong, and we're seeing this in the eastern part of the state with unions striking for many days where kids are out of school, right? You want to hear about these things, you want to know about these things before they happen, because whether it's a strike or whether it's some sort of a grievance or, God forbid, a suit, litigation, you're always the first party named. As an individual member, you have no authority at all. You have no greater power than any other person out in the community to make decisions on behalf of the school committee. Your contribution comes through the way you communicate at the board table with your fellow members. It's the sharing of information, the sharing of ideas. It's the passion that you bring to the work. I was not always on the prevailing side of votes, But I always walked away from the table understanding that it was my responsibility to support the vote that the board took on a particular action, and not to sort of criticize the board for that action they took. That just creates difficulties that sometimes are hard to overcome when something comes along that you really want to accomplish as an individual member, and you need all the folks sitting at the table with you to get that done. It's your responsibility when things come up to ask the questions. If you don't understand something fully, and you have a difficult time supporting something that's happened, ask the questions so you can better understand it. It may bring you to a place where you can get on board with something, with a decision being made. You are, in fact, as I said at the beginning, the work is all about the students, and that's what brings us together. That's what gives us the ability to show up every night when we might prefer to be home with our own families, spending time, but we know what it means to people in this community that you're here doing the work on behalf of the students. I think it's important sometimes to step back and ask ourselves, in many places in life, if you could hit the next slide, please. If every meeting of this board is a chapter in your story, what's your story about? Right? What's the effectiveness? How can you help to make this a better, more thoughtful, more committed and dedicated community? And sometimes it's just reaching out to that individual that may be feeling like they're struggling with something that's going on and having a conversation. We want to spend a little bit of time because it's important to talk about ethics. Next slide, please, Aaron. You know that when you're elected, the city town clerk here hands you some paperwork. One is paperwork on ethics, saying congratulations, take the ethics training, sign the certification, and give it back to us. Congratulations, here's the open meeting law material. Ensure that you go onto the website, look through the materials, watch the videos, and look for any decisions against your committee for the last 5 years. Almost no one does that. And it's so important. I'm grateful that districts now, through usually the town clerk, ensure that everybody in district, including school committees, take the ethics test every 2 years. It can sometimes be difficult to gauge when you are personally in a situation that might be a bit of an ethical dilemma for you. But always ask the question. If you think you might be in a place that feels a bit uncomfortable, ask the question. So, MASC has a set of school board member ethics, school committee member ethics, that I know probably exists in your policy manual. It exists in many people's policy manuals. It exists in our member handbook. And the most important things to understand are listed on the next slide, Erin. Thank you. You need to recognize that the only action that can be taken by the full board at the committee table, again, we can't, sometimes are tempted to say, I'll make sure this gets fixed. I can do it. No, you really can't. You can best do it by ensuring that folks go through the proper chain of command, that if it's an issue that rises to the level of coming to the committee table, if it falls under one of your buckets of work, that you talk with the chair and get something on the agenda so you can hash things out at the table. Critically important when you're in executive session, that the confidentiality of that executive session does not get breached. There's a few reasons for that. Obviously, there's people on the other side, there's individuals on the other side of that executive session But also, ethics laws can hold you personally responsible for breaching the confidentiality of executive session, particularly if an individual or some group of people is harmed by that breach of confidentiality. And I know you will learn about that as you take the ethics exam online every 2 years. If you ever have a question, you might be surprised to hear me say this, but folks at the Ethics Commission are really good people, and they're happy to talk to anybody who feels they have a question to help keep you out of a situation where you cross the line. They would rather do that than have to deal with you after you're in a situation where you've crossed the line and somebody has brought it to their attention. Really good group of people. You should never withhold pertinent information on a particular topic before the board that might sway a vote. That perhaps isn't the way you want to see the vote go, but share that information with the committee so that everybody has the same information you have when making a decision. Of course, we know we don't make promises to anyone. I've said that a number of times. It's very tempting many times, more tempting in small communities than large communities. And small communities is where I've had my actual school committee experience, so I can say that from personal experience. You get close with people in the community, you want to help people in the community, especially when it comes to something that you think will benefit their children. Don't do it. And don't promise or make promises outside of meetings on the way you're going to vote on something until you've had the opportunity to sit at the table with your colleagues and hear all of the information. I know myself, I went into things a number of times when I thought I was sure that I did or did not want something to happen, but when I took the time to listen to everything presented, I realized that the thought process I came into the meeting with was not the right way to go. I think everybody will find themselves in that situation once or twice over their school committee experience. I feel like my slides might be a bit out of order, but I'm going to jump into this one. If you click forward 2 more, Aaron, please. Oh, one back. There we go. It looks better in color than it was in black and white. We're going to talk a little bit about the chair and relationships with the chair. We know that Robert's rules and other parliamentary procedures tell us that the chair is the servant of the assembly and not the master. And this is really quite true. The chair spends a great deal of time outside of meetings, making sure that things are properly planned and organized, making sure that you all have the information that you need to make an appropriate decision. In addition to scheduling and other sort of housekeeping things that you maybe don't think about because you don't have to spend the time doing them yourself. It really is a pretty intensive role in most communities. John Carver has a pretty good description of what he believes the chair is. That's the next slide, please, Aaron. And I think it's really accurate. It requires skilled handling of the group process. An ability to lead a group fairly but firmly, an ability to confront and even to welcome diversity, and that's diversity of opinions, an ability to adhere to agreed upon rules for board conduct. Next slide, please, Aaron. The chair guides the work of the committee, keeps the committee organized, and keeps the focus on the mission, vision, and goals of the district, which of course directly correlates with student outcomes. And the chair shares leadership responsibilities. That's done both with the vice chair, that's done through subcommittees and subcommittee chairs. And the chair helps the committee to be greater than the sum of its parts. That's a pretty big responsibility, right? To ensure that people are all in the same, moving in the same direction, if you will, refer back to the skull, and people are rowing the boat. Sometimes, heck, we don't want to go in the same direction, but if we take a moment to think about what the actual benefits would be to the students in the district, and the fact that our fellow board members have already made a decision that that's the direction we're going in, it will do us no good to row in the opposite direction. Being the chair, I was the vice chair for a time and never wanted to take on the chair myself, because you have to be incredibly organized and pay attention to all of the details. It takes leadership skills, interpersonal skills, communication skills, and most importantly, knowledge of the legal obligations of the committee, including the open meeting law, collective bargaining, and conflict of interest laws. These are not aspirational things. These are laws that we have to abide by. And it can sometimes be easy to forget about those things, which is important, an important reason that the chair has focused on those things for you, to be sure that you don't find your name plastered in the local publication for having done something contrary to the open meeting law or government ethics. Can I see the next slide, please, Aaron? So committee members will have some relationships with district staff. In fact, you have a policy that talks about how you will communicate with staff. And if you show us the next slide, Aaron, I think that you'll quickly see that there's a common thread. Small communities, we see each other out in the out and about, grocery store, restaurant, prices. Everybody likes going over to, it's going to escape me now, the nice restaurant just around the corner on Boston Road. It's a lovely meal. SEMA. The superintendent is the direct supervisor of pretty much everyone. We know that principals supervise their staffs, yet the superintendent is responsible for supervising the principals and ensuring all of that is moving smoothly. So anytime you're going to have a communication with a staff member or visit a school, always run that through the superintendent. If you need something from your business manager or your special ed director, please don't call your special ed director directly. The superintendent has a good handle on the work that's going on in the district from day to day. The superintendent may, in a particular area, want to refer you to someone else to get your concerns or get the information that you need quickly. And the superintendent is careful to ensure that the most important work on behalf of the students is happening in the district first, before distracting the work or to gather some other information. Particularly, we as school committee members sometimes ask for reports, financial reports, reports on student discipline, reports on how many kids are out of district and what's that costing us. That takes a good deal of time away from that leader's work, again, on behalf of students. So we want to be mindful of running those things through the superintendent and not going directly to anyone in the district. Whether we're a parent or not, I had young children when I was on the school committee. I loved being in the school building with them. I walked them into their classrooms every day. And I had to be keenly aware that every day I walked my kids into school, everyone did not see me as their parent. They saw me as a member of the school committee first. And if I ever had a time when I needed to talk to the principal or teacher about something about my children, I had to be very clear, and sometimes in multiple different ways, that I was not there as a school committee member, but as a parent only. And I know they still hesitated and saw me as a school committee member. So be thoughtful when you're talking to staff at the school level.
Can you go into that a little more for everybody about the fact that, you know, I'm a parent in the district, but also I'm a school committee member, and I'm never not a school committee member as I'm never not a parent, you know?
But can you also relate that to the chain of command as to how you deal with things as while you understand that you're a school committee member, you're not above everybody else?
So I have 2 daughters, and really being a mother was the best time of my life, and still I was in a small community that needed someone to serve on the school committee. And so I did that. And you can bet your bottom dollar that whenever my child was unhappy, the first thing they wanted to do was go into the school and solve whatever it was. I might have done that once or twice before I realized that I should touch base with the superintendent first. In my particular case, very small school district, less than 500 students, I would just let the superintendent know that I was going to go in and talk to the 2nd grade teacher because of something that happened with my daughter, and that I would make it quite clear that I was not there as a school committee member and that I was there as a parent, because I wanted to have that conversation first to understand if what my daughter was relating to me was accurate. You always get 2 stories, and you have to sort of be creative around finding what the middle ground is. You have to work with the teacher to find middle ground and to resolve issues so that your child wants to be in that 2nd grade classroom and wants to be happy and thriving in that 2nd grade classroom. Ensuring that you remind them consistently, and they'll still see you as a school committee member, that you're really just there as a parent and you're trying to make that connection so that your student can have the best possible experience in the class is critically important. Building a relationship with the teacher, I didn't hesitate when my child was unhappy or I felt unhappy, but I did it in a way that I never went into the school angry. I never went into the school accusing anyone of anything. And when I was happy about something, I let people know. I would show up with cookie plates, boxes of donuts or muffins occasionally, leave them in the teacher's room, just to say thank you all for not only dealing with me as a parent, because I'm passionate about my kids, but for dealing with all the other parents who feel the same way I do. If you have a child in a classroom with 18 or 20 kids, you can count on the fact that at least half of those parents are probably showing up almost as much as you are into the teacher's classroom, especially in the smaller communities. I think it might not be quite as true in the larger communities, but places like Hamden, Wilbraham, people are very involved. And we don't want to appear to be threatening. I was never a believer that I couldn't speak up because my child would be retaliated against. It just wasn't something that I ever considered. I think you have to be as complimentary as you can when the time is right, as you can be concerned when you feel concerned. Is that helpful to you? We are parents all the time, and I saw myself as a parent first. People in the school saw me as a school committee member first. And so I had to be cognizant of that all the time, especially since my favorite part of the day was walking the kids to the classrooms, and seeing everybody's face showing up in the morning. Didn't always make the teachers happy, but it made me incredibly happy. It's just something you have to be very thoughtful about. Thank you, Erin. School committee policies. You can move to the next slide, please, Aaron. So we can find policy in many places in the district besides the policy manual. And I know you all have seen this if you've attended a charting course, but there is the policy manual, there are student handbooks that create oftentimes different policies while they are repeating some of the more important policies that are in the district policy manual, particularly around due process and discipline and things like that. Policy exists in collective bargaining agreements. Your strategic plan is a policy that you've created for the district. The goals that you create along the lines of the strategic plan and with the superintendent ultimately become policies for the district. You can find policy in school committee minutes. You sometimes make a motion on how a certain thing will be done. It's not something that makes it into your policy manual, yet you have effectively stated policy in your minutes. Well, this is a slide that goes back a few years because it talks about grant applications and race to the top. ESSER could be replaced with ESSER. We made a lot of decisions around how to spend ESSER funds. Some of those became policy decisions. Many legal documents filed for you by council is in fact a policy. Long-standing past practices become policy legally, whether we consider them or not. If you find yourself in litigation based on a past practice, you'll find the court siding with the past practice oftentimes. You do have a regional agreement, and that is loaded with policy. Town charter makes some decisions for you. You have 2 town charters that you deal with, correct? And both of them will talk about how the charter affects the school committee and its work. And your budget is really a value statement, but it's a policy in terms of how you spend your money. You spend your money according to the goals that you've set and the things that you say you want to achieve. They're tied intricately together. If you're not funding the things you say you value, your budget work is not being done the way it should be done. Next slide, please. Oh, never mind, Erin, you're already there. So when you're talking about at the school committee level, when you're making motions on certain things, take a moment to reflect and think to yourself, is what we're deciding now legal? Does it reflect current practice, or are we creating something different through this motion? Is it working, or will it work? Is there something we need to change, and do we need to do that for policy, or can we do it at the committee table? Do we need to make a new policy? One of the biggest things I do when I sit with committees to do this sort of comprehensive policy review is really convince folks that they don't need 700 policies in their policy manual. There are many things that they've overstepped on and created a difficult situation for their administration to run the schools. And we should remove those kinds of policies from policy manuals. I'm glad to hear that you do a recurring review of policies. Not a lot of districts do that. Yeah, because policies do become irrelevant over time, and less is sometimes better. We need to be sure that policies are very clear statements. That's the next slide. That set forth the purpose in general terms for programs in a school district, and ensure that it creates a framework from within the superintendent may implement strategies so that those policies are laid out across the district evenly, effectively, and it keeps things moving in a positive direction. It's really, when we create policy, we don't often think about the work that the superintendent has to do in terms of relating that policy, making sure that it's shared properly, making sure that people understand what the policy is for and what needs to be done around it. I want to talk next about the agenda in terms of subcommittees. I shock a lot of people when we talk about subcommittees related to the open meeting law and related to roles and responsibilities. Most committees I've talked with over the past year and a half or so seem to be taken by surprise when I tell them that minutes need to be created for all subcommittees. You can have different ways of approving those minutes. Sometimes subcommittees like to approve their minutes first to ensure accuracy before going back to the full board. That's okay. I think it ties things up for a little longer than they need to be tied up. But the full board needs to approve subcommittee minutes. The reason for that is no action happens, as we said earlier, unless the full board approves it. Subcommittees meet for one purpose, and that is to bring back recommendations to the full board on particular topics. Those topics have been referred there first by the full board. The open meeting law tells us that when subcommittees, and it tells us this through open meeting law determinations, violations essentially of open meeting law. If a school committee goes outside the scope of their authority, or if the subcommittee rather goes outside the scope of their authority, meaning the authority of the school committee in making decisions, or if a subcommittee makes decisions or believes they can make decisions without school committee approval, they violated the open meeting law because as a public body, you've created these subcommittees. You've agreed that the district needs, what subcommittees do you have? I'm going to assume policy subcommittee, finance and budget, maybe the facilities, superintendent evaluation.
Yeah, and planning committee.
Planning
That's not
committee.
really, that kind of is a curriculum.
And negotiations. And the reason you have those is so that work can be parsed out to those individual subcommittees. Oftentimes, there's a great deal of planning in who's appointed to those subcommittees, so people with particular expertise, and on the budget committee or the policy subcommittee or the negotiations subcommittee. And that work can only get to you through an action of the full board. You can't decide that since policy's in our purview, and we've just completed review of the manual, maybe it's time for us to consider whether we need a new policy on athletic fields. No, you can only do that if it's been referred to you by the full board. So if the full board has referred the issue of reviewing the policy manual to the subcommittee, you're not straying from the actual policy manual. Here's our policy manual. Here's what it is. Is it up to date? Do we need to update it? Is it still accurate and relevant? Do we still need it in the policy manual? Unless some recommendation is coming typically through the superintendent to the school committee and then is referred to subcommittee. And I say this typically because there is an exception to that, and that would typically be finance and budget. Finance and budget is an ever-evolving topic. You may constantly need to pivot pretty quickly to deal with some situation that the superintendent needs handled, and that would end up in the finance and budget subcommittee, sometimes before being referred through the full board, because the superintendent has brought it in, not necessarily, well, it's not necessarily, not because subcommittee has decided they need to talk about it. Recommendations should come through the superintendent if there's a time constraint and it's not able to get through the full board first. Does that make sense to everybody? Subcommittees, you might be surprised, are all across the board. And I never cease to be shocked when people think, we have to do minutes? Well, what have you done in the subcommittee? Well, we talked about policy and budget, and how does that then get implemented? Well, we decided in subcommittee. Well, no, that's really not how it works. It takes the entire body to decide, right?
Can you speak to the open meeting law pertaining to subcommittees?
Generally, yes, I can. The open meeting law applies to subcommittees the same way it does to full board. You must have a quorum of members present to conduct business. You must have posted the meeting 48 hours in advance, excluding Saturdays, Sundays, and legal holidays. You must post a complete agenda, and this has really become a highlight of open meeting law violations. The agenda must be specific enough so the average member of your communities can understand what you're going to talk about. I was at a meeting recently, and in fact, there's been a couple of open meeting law violation determination recently related to policy. We're going to review policy section A. Who in the public would know what that means? You literally are required to list every policy in that section. Now that's as easy as saying, policy section A, please see attached index. But the community has the right to know what you're talking about when you're talking about it, in case they're interested in participating in the subcommittee or the full board meeting where those recommendations come forward, in case they have public comment. Every time, if an open meeting law complaint is made, committees lose if their agenda has not been specific enough so that a member of the public could reasonably understand what they're going to discuss. And not dissimilar to executive session. If you go into executive session for a particular purpose, and then you veer off and start discussing something else, you're essentially violating the open meeting law. You have to be very clear why you're going into executive session, and that all revolves around the public's right to know about the work that you're doing. Is that helpful? Mm-hmm. You cannot essentially have a subcommittee meeting if you don't have a quorum of subcommittee members. You have typically 3 members, so you need 2 members present to conduct business. And those minutes do have to come back to the full board to be approved before any action becomes official. Are there any more questions about subcommittees? I feel like this is an area that is often misunderstood or taken too casually. And when I say often, I say almost every time. I'm surprised when a committee has it exactly right. I'm pleasantly surprised. Okay, can we go to the next slide, please? Hit that clicker, Erin.
Oh, I'm sorry, the second one, I have 2 minutes to do.
Go back one, please. Agendas. And that leads us right into agendas. All agendas really, I can't say this enough, have to have enough specificity that the person down at Rice's, if they were interested in something that you were discussing, would be able to look at the agenda and understand that's what you're going to be talking about, so that they could be present and give public input if they wanted to, or so that they could call their representative and pass on information that they might have. That's why the open meeting law exists, so that public bodies conduct their meetings in the open. Interestingly, school committees are the only elected public body that are mandated to have training on these things. And we often hear school committee members at Charting the Course talk about, gosh, I wish our select board was here because they don't know any of this. I'm glad that school committees have to do it because your work, to me, is the most critical work. That's why I set them to be on mine. If you sit on a school committee, it's the most critical work happening in a town, a municipality, because it's all about the students attending your schools. And the students, in my humble opinion, are the future of all of us. Next slide, please. If you so choose, you may plan a year-long agenda. They're often very effective. It is very easy to tie in reporting on goals of the superintendent, also on, well, since the superintendent likely has their hands quite full with the goals for the year that have been set based on the strategic plan and priorities within that plan, I'm going to stick to that. So it gives you the opportunity to think a year in advance about when you might want particular presentations on goals. It gives the superintendent and the staff the opportunity to know well in advance when they're going to be presenting on a particular topic, so they don't find out 2 weeks ahead of time and have to crash to make a full and effective presentation with data for the committee. It helps you to stay on target with budget and spending. You're going to want to know when you're looking at those finance reports. Do you get quarterly finance reports here, John, or some periodic financial report for the committee? A best monthly. I was going to say a best practice is quarterly, but monthly is, if you can manage it, you're doing a great job with it. So you probably see, here's what we said we were going to spend, here's what we've spent, and here's what we project to spend out. You will know from month to month whether you might be seeing a potential deficit coming down the road, what transfers might look like going down the road. Outstanding, Superintendent Provost. You will know ahead of time about policy work that you're going to have to concentrate on. And those agendas can tie in for you the times when you're going to be looking at things related to the superintendent's evaluation. If you miss a meeting, you may want to watch that meeting or pay close attention to the minutes of that meeting if it's not recorded, so that when evaluation time comes around, you have that presentation on whatever the goal accomplishment was or whatever the particular area was, so that you're not just relying on the evidence, although the evidence is essential to the evaluation process, but you have that recollection of the presentation that ties directly to the evaluation. And if you go back one, Aaron. Well, really, we just talked about all that. Oh, subcommittee reports. So I want to, since we took a moment to be clear about subcommittees, if you were to go online and look at almost any of your neighboring schools, committees, agendas, you might see something like reports of subcommittees that just lists the subcommittees underneath. Violation of the open meeting law. If you are going to give a subcommittee report, the items that the chair, and that would be both the chair of the subcommittee and the chair of the school committee, reasonably anticipate you'll be reporting out on, need to be listed on your agenda. It's all about the public's right to know the work you're doing. Okay, next slide, please.
Regarding agendas, can you quickly define what is a reasonably anticipated item?
So that's anything you have knowledge about at the time you're posting the agenda. If you know that there's a contingent of folks in the community that are either excited or displeased about a particular thing and are likely to show up, this actually took us all a bit by surprise, but there was probably the first ever open meeting law violation upheld against the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education. And it revolved around the chair having knowledge of a group of people that wanted to come and speak under public comment about anti-bias related to the war in Israel. The chair communicated with those folks and those emails were gathered as part of the investigation process and made sure that they were going to show up at a particular meeting. I believe there were 5 of them. They were all allowed time to speak on the topic. And the Attorney General's office said you could reasonably have anticipated that this anti-bias conversation was going to occur. And this anti-bias conversation is clearly a topic that the public would be interested in knowing was going to be discussed at the board level. So the board had some interaction about that public speak as well. And found the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education in violation of the open meeting law for not listing anti-bias under their public comment section on the agenda. So if you have knowledge ahead of time that, and it's not necessarily one person who's going to come in and talk about something, but in this particular case, it's a topic of real passion for a lot of people. There were 5 people involved. They all talked one right after another. And then after public speak, the board had conversation about that.
Well,
That's a tricky wicket.
So my question is, so if we have an agenda item, it's listed, and then we have members of the community that choose to speak on that topic during public comment, do we also have to list it under public comment?
No,
as a separate item?
As long as it's listed on your agenda once, it's listed on your agenda, yes. So anti-bias, for example, was not listed on that Bessie agenda.
I'm wondering if, as someone who has spoken in public comment before the board, if the fact that you need permission to speak ahead of time might also be a case, like when I've spoken, you had to submit your comments ahead of time, you had to be told whether or not you were going to be allowed to speak, and so you kind of knew. That's a little bit different than a typical school committee meeting when anyone might show up and speak on anything. Do you think that difference in fact pattern is important?
I think that, so there's a lot of things we can talk about public comment. And we do have a slide on that, but I'm just going to dive right into it right now. You may make some rules around public comment. You may request that the public comment on items on the agenda, for example, or for only comment on areas under the school committee's purview. However, as we all know from Supreme Court cases, if someone wants to get up and you do not know they're going to talk about some anti-bias or some other situation that's of great interest to the community, but you have no foreknowledge of that, you must allow them to speak. The only reasons you can shut down, so once you've acknowledged and allowed somebody the microphone, the only reason you can shut down public comment is if folks are threatening violence, threatening to incite violence, and one other very specific reason related to some violent action, according to the Supreme Court's ruling. It has to be a pretty egregious situation. The first court case on that was about a gentleman in Natick who was so annoyed with the committee for not listening to the individual's public comment on a particular topic that he started showing up with his trumpet and blowing his trumpet for 3 minutes. And they shut him down. They called a recess and called the police and said that he needs to be escorted from the building. The court has ruled that, no, he had 3 minutes. You acknowledged him, you gave him the mic. If he wanted to blow his horn for 3 minutes, thank him at the end of his 3 minutes and move on to the next speaker. I know. Yes.
No, that's fine. Hopefully they play well. But when you said egregious, so let's say if someone comes up in public comment and they talk about Sean Kennedy. Sean Kennedy is a reckon, whatever. Okay, then that's fine. And
Yes.
that is okay. I'm a public figure. They
That's
can
right.
say whatever they want. Now, if they start talking about my wife or my children, I
Yeah.
believe that is also acceptable, or is that not
So that's
acceptable?
very
What about
interesting.
John or Aaron or Josh?
So that's very interesting. The chair should certainly interrupt them and should let them know that these individuals have the expectation of privacy, they are not public figures, and that they are opening themselves to possible litigation if they continue to speak. And if you have
But
any
we don't
questions,
shut them down, right?
you can't. And even more significant is, not that you're not significant, Aaron or John, but sometimes parents get up and talk not only about their children, so they're giving up their children's privacy. You should acknowledge to them that they're doing that, but they want to mention other children by name. And so this is really a legal question. I'm not an attorney. But if you have a parent getting up and talking about another child, I mean, these court cases would tell us you can't shut them down. So if I had concern about that, John, I'd talk to legal counsel and see what you could do. Because students do have a right to privacy in the district, and you have a responsibility to make sure that's maintained. We haven't had a case on that yet. But the Supreme Court doesn't talk about it either. They simply say, unless they're inciting some sort of violence or threatening violence or violence is imminent, you have to let them speak. I don't want someone speaking about my kid.
If we have protocols that are clearly stated on a sign and say you have 2 minutes to speak, but it's a really hot topic and people go well over, can you ask them to stop?
You can ask them to stop. And that's something that the chair really has to weigh. So the validity of the particular concern and allowing someone to perhaps speak over time versus shutting them down. That's a very, very difficult situation to be in. I was actually at a meeting with a parent who had a very emotional and difficult situation with their child, spoke for almost 15 minutes. And the chair at one point asked for a motion to recess and nobody offered one. So they all sort of braced themselves and just listened. I don't want to say waited for the parent to be done, listened actively to what the parent had to say. And the parent came back to subsequent meetings, but then was good about staying to around the 3-minute mark. Yeah, that's a case-by-case call.
It also gets tricky that if you give that one parent 15 minutes to talk,
Yes.
Cheryl, and then I'm another parent then comes up and I do my 2 minutes and about 3 minutes and you say, okay, Mr. Kennedy, you're done. And I'm like, well, they got to talk for 15 minutes. It's a whole thing.
So one thing you can do on your agenda is say that, and this is a rule that you can enforce, public comment will last for 15 minutes. So if one person takes up the entire 15 minutes, you essentially, now you have to make another decision. Do we suspend the rules and allow more public comment? There are, for some districts, there will be times when the topic is so pertinent and so emotional that it might be the best call to brace yourselves and listen closely. I hope that doesn't happen here.
Does anyone have any questions for Liz?
Yeah, how about personnel matters?
Mhm.
I have been at school committee meetings where someone wants to talk about a particular teacher or a particular administrator, and the chair has stopped them because that's a personnel matter. Is that
I've
what
been
you-
at meetings like that too, but since the Supreme Court case, the best that a chair can do now is to interrupt, let that speaker know that that individual has the right to privacy. Please don't use names, and essentially give that person their 3 minutes. It's a tough call.
Back to the agenda part. So if we have like updates from the subcommittees, do we have to have a whole agenda, or could we say reviews, the last meeting? Is that good enough, or do you need all the
The
topics?
topics need to be listed, yeah, and there's been a number of determinations on that, which is why I'm saying that to you. That's not my judgment, that's the judgment of the Attorney General's office.
And if the minutes of the meeting are attached and said, please refer to the minutes of the meeting, is that okay?
Still have to list the topics, so
Okay.
that if I'm out there and I only have the agenda, I need to know what you're gonna talk about.
Okay, just checking.
Yeah. Once, it's a new habit that a lot of people have to get into, but it's better than having your name splashed across Mass Live for an open meeting law violation, right?
Yep.
Any other questions for this? Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for coming.
Can I give you a quick minute on meetings?
Oh, absolutely.
Meeting minutes?
Sure.
So we talked about public comment already, we skipped over that slide in the open meeting law. Meeting minutes. Erin, do you do meeting minutes?
This is Mary, she's our.
Mary. Oh, God love you, Mary.
We
You know,
We do.
So, you know that we need to keep minutes. We said this already for regular executive sessions and all subcommittee meetings. They need to be a summary of the discussion so that a member of the public might reasonably understand how you reached a decision. Please don't make Mary do extra long sets of minutes. It's a summary of the topic discussed so that someone in the public might reasonably understand how you reached a decision. The open meeting law defines when minutes should be completed, must be completed. They say it's a timely manner, and they further define that as 30 days or 3 meetings, whichever is longer. I know that oftentimes we're in a position, especially during budget time, when it's difficult to do that. At the end of the day, the Attorney General's office has determined that you can't say that our executive assistant is overloaded, just can't get to the work, because the Attorney General will say, that's your job, not their job. So if you have to provide extra assistance, if you have to pitch in to get minutes done, hopefully nobody ever complains about that here. But sometimes it's impossible to get all those minutes done. Just putting that out there. And any minutes that are requested by a member of the public have to be provided, either in approved or draft form within 10 days of the request. I would add to that if there are executive session minutes that are not ready, you still have the 3 meetings. And before I gave anybody executive session minutes, I would check with counsel. And that, unless you have further questions, is it. There's a lot to this work, and as I said when I first sat down here, it's getting harder all the time. So you all know how to get a hold of me, and I'm happy, even though right now, as Erin can tell you, I'm working without internet, because apparently we built a house in a neighborhood where the internet has to be like underground. I don't, anyway, maybe in a week or 2 I'll have internet, but using my hotspot is not my favorite thing. Took me 3 tries to get the presentation to Erin today. We really exist only to help you with questions. These presentations to me just provide a really broad overview, and I really would encourage you, if you have any specific questions, to reach out to any one of us during the day, at night, weekends. We do answer our phones. And if we don't, and you want to shoot a text message, we'll get back to you.
Thank you again.
You're welcome. It's so nice to see you, Josh.
Nice to see you.
I worked with Josh over in Northampton during the search, and he was a bright light in that process.
It's very kind.
Thank you.
So what we will do, people need a moment to use any of the restrooms, but then also if you could have your questions ready, We'll be ready to begin in the next 10 minutes, in about 10 minutes.
I don't know what other people want to ask, but I wanted to do number 10 and change it instead of first steps to say what would be your entry plan, unless somebody else already had that.
All you?
Number 10.
I'd like to do number 4. I might add a little bit.
I hope the AD applies, but
You may have your own, right?
Yeah, we're
the
going to do
work
the one
gets
about
harder every day, and we're all resolved over the
Yeah.
last 10 years to just try to stay as positive and productive and helpful as possible.
What are you saying?
I'm welcoming them and asking them to tell us a little bit about themselves,
And be thankful we're in Massachusetts.
let us know what brought
We're
them
hopefully,
here tonight.
they're.
I also close, so I generally don't ask the questions.
Right, but I just wanted to make sure you said it so if other people were going to somehow.
I'm first.
Yes. No, I mean,
We're recessed, but also just
Thank you so
check. We're
much.
still. Oh, sure. Okay.
Yeah.
What does it pertain to?
They give me so many clothes. This is a new sweatshirt. I put it on this morning and I'm like,
Okay.
my wife as well. She's determined to get my
So maybe we'll
paycheck back.
just go around the,
okay, so did you want to do Michelle,
Did you have a question?
so, so again, me, Sean, and then Mike, because then it's
Kids,
question
that-
time.
I think, were you there when I first
see
started
what
9
Cheryl
years
wants
ago?
to do.
Not quite before that.
7, okay.
Okay, so then Cheryl and then Lisa, you'll be the last. Oh, Rich, would you like to
Yeah,
ask?
Sure.
question you'd like to ask?
Oh, okay.
And she lost her for a while there. They had someone else come and I was like,
So someone has.
she's back and today's the
Or
first
if you
time
have
that she's
another
back.
question that is not on the list that you are interested in asking,
10 times.
that is acceptable as well.
That's number 11.
Okay. Okay, so
Well,
you go
it's
after
been, they've
Lisa.
been pretty good. The Wilbraham Times and the Reminder, they've really been pretty good.
Okay, so we're going to take a quick recess again.
So Michelle, Sean, Mike, Tim, Cheryl, Lisa, Rich, Michelle. Okay.
Yeah. Very, very rarely if they, and if they, sometimes when they said something, I didn't say that, that was actually Bill who said that, but
You're okay.
But like for the interviews, I'm going to record. I didn't know.
Or, oh, this is great.
and you've heard this 6 times.
I might be able to say it verbatim,
I don't know.
but no, I wouldn't.
The two things, the problems that I get, like, you know how I had whenever I first stuff to you guys?
Cheryl, me, Rich.
For every one that I referred to, there's 10 that I don't.
I got you, Sean.
Like, I get calls every other day from enraged parents. And I listen, and I say, yes, yes, yes. And I say, you've gone through the steps. I have a speech that I said, you go to your teacher, they'll come to the principal, whatever. They gotta go through the steps, because if you just jump up here, well, then why would anyone do that? Yeah, exactly, you know? So, it's better when you're involved in decisions than making someone else involved.
Plus, throughout that process of things are going to understand a little bit more, or it's going to turn out, actually, it's not exactly how it is.
Yes.
Things are going to come
It's
out.
almost always not exactly how it happened.
3 times every story, right?
But my hope is that we can use the money to,
So the scary part is sometimes when a parent comes on and they're giving you, this is what the other side said, this is what I said, this is what my child said, this is what I think happened, and you're kind of going, all right, that's the person, that's the parent that you like Renee, right? When Renee says something, it's like, she doesn't talk unless she, exactly, thank you. I think we're still recording. Huh? Assistant
we went to an AI policy setting session at the
Finance and operations.
Also, does anyone sell this?
No, actually, we just buy them for
And
us.
every time I see him, he's sporting the gear.
You will never see me wear one twice. No, I mean, I do wear, there's certain ones that I really like, But I literally get a new sweatshirt 4 or 5 times a year. And when I had 5 or 6 stations that I was covering, I would get 4 or 5 a year from 5 or 6 different stations. So my sweatshirts, my son has
It is
sweatshirts,
pretty awesome, actually.
sweatpants,
I don't love
socks.
a lot of the things graders do with their money, so. You know, it saves me money, because if I go to the store, I'm not buying that. But I'm just ordering, I know what I want, this is what I'm here for, this is what I'm getting.
And you can buy from local sellers. You can buy from small independent sellers. It shows you who you're buying it from. You can buy from Amazon or sellers. You pay a little more for book versus seller. You can buy new and used, especially if it's a book, buy it from individuals.
Electronics, refurbished,
Yep.
save a lot of money.
Oh, yeah.
I,
Hey, John, do you know he's here? Okay. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Oh, she did. What you do is so quickly. No, it is. Like in the negotiations.
They changed everybody around.
Whatever we should do. But we have to keep executive.
Okay, so we are going to review the order of the questions because our candidate is here and he is waiting in the hallway. So the questions, everyone has decided and given us the questions, we just want to go over the order. So our first candidate. Our first candidate, or our candidate this evening, is Douglas Slaughter. And so we have questions that we'll be asking him. So when he comes in, he will sit at the table. We will begin with introductions. And then I will ask the first question, which will just ask him a little bit about himself and to tell us what brought him here this evening. The second question will be Sean. So everyone, please just remember who is before you. So Sean is next, then Mike, Tim, Cheryl, Lisa, Rich, and then I will close just again following up with if there's anything that they would like to add. Okay, does everyone have the order? Okay. Hi, how are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Well, welcome. Thank you for being here. We are going to begin with introducing ourselves. I'm Michelle Boucher, I'm the school committee chair.
Hi, Cheryl Carolina, I'm the school committee.
Rich Rediker.
Lisa Murray.
I'm Mike Terabassi.
I'm Sean Kennedy. We've met before, and also have a student in the district.
Tim Collins, member of the school committee.
Sure. Of course, we've met before as well. I'm John Provost, Superintendent.
Cammy Limka, Interim Assistant Superintendent for Business Finance.
Lisa Curtin, Director of Curriculum Instruction and Professional Learning.
And Josh Dixon, Director of Student Services. Nice to see you again.
I would also like to announce that Sarah from the Reminder is recording the meeting for this portion of the meeting only. So thank you for being here. We have a series of questions that we'll be asking you. So if you could first just let us know a little bit about yourself and what brought you here today.
Sure. Since we're doing an introduction, my name is Zach Slaughter. You just call me Doug. I've been working in school districts for the last just shy of 20 years. Started working in the Amherst School District, first in the IT department, and then subsequently moved into the business office in the beginning of 2020, right before the pandemic hit. It was an interesting time to sort of shift into that role. As you know, Amherst has had some challenges in the last couple of years. And last school year, I served as interim superintendent. Our previous superintendent had taken a leave of absence in May to July, and then subsequent to the issues in the district, he felt his role would be compromised by him being there, so he stepped away, and I stepped in and filled in as an interim for the last year. And so then I'm now transitioning away from the district. At this point, been a good run. It's been nice. I've also, over the course of the years, in my work in town and how I got into finance was partly because I started did some community work with some town meeting when Amherst still had town meeting, served on the finance committee, subsequently on the select board, served on a number of regional boards as well, and so I've got a breadth of experience. I've been in a lot of roles and different government seats, and so I understand those challenges and opportunities that come up with those kinds of positions. So I have a wide variety of experience and a wide spectrum of information I've gathered over the years in the different roles I've had in different places.
Thank you.
Hi, so we're going to start with the question that I asked everyone during the initial interviews towards the end. When I said the assistant superintendent role is a kitchen sink role with so many different moving parts. How does this job fit into your career path?
So for me, as you guessed from sort of the hair color, I'm not at the beginning of my career, but nonetheless, I've been working and transitioning throughout my career from an IT sort of profession to a finance profession. Didn't have the title of operations as part of my title officially, although nonetheless I worked closely in those areas in the past district. Likewise, I actually came into the district in the IT phase, or in the IT aspect of my career, working on human resources problems and questions for them, so I've had an interaction with our HR department for a long time. So this is a natural progression of taking on more responsibility in each of those areas. And I'm looking forward to that. I think that this is sort of direction and path that I've been bouncing toward. I wouldn't say it was a straight line, but nonetheless, the direction I've been heading, and I think this is a great opportunity for me to continue to provide those services to the district.
Great. As a quick follow-up, could you tell us a little bit more about your finance experience?
Sure. So like I said, I served on the finance committee in the town of Amherst for a number of years, and then on select board during that time, worked intimately with those entities, and the school budgets are a huge part of town budgets, and so I got to understand the elementary budget in Amherst, which is a municipal budget, municipal school district for pre-K to 6. I certainly became aware of Pelham, which is a small, similar situation with the municipal district, and then of course the regional school district, which involves 2 other towns, Shrewsbury and Leverett. So in that role, I definitely interacted with both the finance of the town specifically, but also specifically the schools, and also understood the constraints and concerns of the other communities in the regional district. And then once in IT, doing a lot of work with HR, like I said, and also working closely with the former finance director as he prepared and developed his budgets and was close, watching that closely when he was leaving to exit the district, and the district needed a new finance director. Who approached me and said, would you be interested, because you've got experience with some of this, you certainly know the sort of political players in the mix. But a number of years of sort of watching and looking closely at, obviously taking the job of finance director is much different, much more detailed, and a lot of learning over the last few years in that regard, but and built a lot of skills, and so I'm excited to continue to do that.
Excellent, thank you.
All right. During the budget season, inaccurate numbers can cause a great deal of unnecessary stress and tension with the towns. The budget poses a number of challenges. As it comes together, you don't even necessarily have all the information. The final numbers from the state, union negotiations may still be going on. What's your strategy or approach to this problem, focusing on, how to produce as timely as possible and as accurately as possible, what the budget is going to be looking like for communications with the town?
Yeah, I think that, it is challenging. You often don't know, sort of what the state's going to ultimately land at, and, I think having conversations with local representatives is helpful, talking to, corresponding finance people in each of the towns, what their history and experience has been. As I said in my other interview, which was earlier in November, it's budget season. It's time to start, sort of reading the tea leaves and trying to figure out those things. I think when you have, in particular, when you have open contracts, you have to make estimates of what those are going to look like, and it's a balancing act between what you would like to provide and what you think those resources are going to look like from both the town side of things, the state side of things. And I think that, while you don't want to give away your position as far as negotiation, so you have to kind of hold that close, you at the same time sort of articulate a number for what you think that's going to look like, what you think is supportable by the towns as they go ahead, and you have that ongoing conversation within the district and the team members there to make sure you understand all of that, as well as with those partners at the municipalities. I think the other thing, it's about being honest about where the firm and non-firm things are. So if we know that our health insurance is going up 6%, we know that is pretty rock solid. That's usually a pretty big number. We can speak to that directly and say, hey, we're pretty confident in this number. If we don't know what that number is, here's what we're estimating, here's why we're estimating that. So it's about explanation of what are the weak spots and when you think they'll resolve and how close you think you're going to be. And I think that, most budgets are 80-85% people and their benefits. You have some sense of the size and scale that that's going to look like. You can generally understand the metrics involved given how negotiations might proceed, what 1%, 2%, 3% kind of cost of living increase is. If there's major other shifts in how contracts are going to play out, you'll do those scenarios and sort of see what those look like. Think about those things. Strategize both from a negotiation standpoint, but then also from a projection standpoint. So there's a host of things, I think, as far as the community conversations about being as open and honest about what you know for sure, what you don't know, what which numbers are soft, as it were, and lacking clarity at this point, and the impacts if they shift in a positive or negative direction, and have contingency for those circumstances as they come up.
Thank you.
Some of what I'm going to ask you just dealt with to some extent, but can you explain the process that you use in developing a school budget and how you would sell your budget to the members of the school committee and the community? And I know in your other capacities you've developed budgets. So over the years, as you've gone through your process, how has it changed and what have you learned?
So I'll talk first about sort of order of events and process. One of the first things is to forecast, and what I've traditionally done is done what's, I've often called it, or people sometimes call it a level services budget, which is starting with what are we doing right now and projecting that forward. So, if you have steps and colas for staff, you project what those are going to look like with the staff you have now, Do you know of certain retirements? Do you know of certain needs in special education you're going to have? You know, sort of plug those in, particularly around the personnel. Similarly, you go through all of your other expenses and look for what do we know about trends in those. Property insurance has been rising at 6, 8, 10% per year, health insurance or those, and go through and articulate each of those line items within the budget to estimate what it's going to look like or what things need to be held steady or, you know, if we have a curriculum initiative, we need resources for that kind of thing. We can put those in on top of a level services budget to say we're going to need a resource for that. And so that helps build the budget, and then, you know, you look at that versus, and, you know, the resources, and so you start to look at what are our revenues, what are the places where we get money, acceptance to towns, state aid, et cetera, and sort of stack up what those look like, how they compare, how firm or not firm they are over time. I think that for me, you know, a couple of things that I've picked up on over the last few years and thought about more carefully is what kind of contingency we put in place. My earlier review, Mr. Dixon here asked a question about what happens when we have that special education need that crops up during the year and we've got to find funding for it, right? So, you know, you can build some contingency into your budget. And I think with any and all of those things, it's about articulating clearly to both the school committee and the broader public, you know, what are our goals, what are our intentions. We're trying to, you know, do our best by students first and foremost within the resources we have available. You know, I'm not one to put out a budget that in no way reflects the reality of what the towns have for resources to fund it. So, you know, there's a balancing act there to be had and honest conversation about what things are most important for our district. And that's for the school committee to articulate and frame as a direction where we go. And myself and the whole host of folks within the school district to identify what's needed to make that happen and find the resources and talk about those resources. And have an understanding what is most important and what are things that have more flexibility to what we do, more creative new ways to do it that may be more cost effective, all of those kinds of things. But I think a really critical piece in a regional school district, especially because you're working with multiple communities and so you're not just having to make that conversation with one group of folks, you're having to do it with two different, they can be very, very different places financially. So you have to keep and make information available and rationales of why they're making this choice versus this choice, trying to be smart about those things. I think the areas that have gotten better over the last few years is you know, estimating you know, things like health insurance costs, who the people to talk to, what's it looking like, what's the best way to approach that. You know, conservatively estimating state aid from DESI and the state. So those are things I think we've refined a bit over the last couple of years and gotten better at, but at the same time, you know, always more to learn and a lot to be learned by me in a new environment here. Understanding what works, what doesn't work, what are the potential pitfalls that might crop up unexpectedly, and try to have some rational process to go through to handle those.
Thank you.
I have two questions, actually. The first one is just a curiosity, having come from being a science teacher. How did we go from chemical engineering to finance?
So if you haven't noticed, I don't have a New England accent. I'm originally from Missouri. I came to UMass to go to graduate school for chemical engineering. Felt that was going to be where I was going to spend my career. But kind of fell in love with the area and people that are here. So decided to stay in the area. Had done a fair amount of computer programming work in my graduate work, and so that was a natural sort of next step. So that kind of put me on that path. I'll relay a little personal anecdote. So I got involved in town government by virtue of going to vote many, many years ago and seeing that my Amherst had at the time a representative town meeting. So you elected people. My district had 8 slots. There were 3 people running. I thought, I'll write myself in. I got elected to town meeting with 3 votes. My wife didn't vote for me because she'd already voted. So I was like, I voted for myself. I mentioned to a friend, their parents voted. I got into town meeting with 3 votes. And so from that point, you know, I mean, so, you know, then the dominoes started to fall as far as sort of getting involved in municipal activities and subsequently looking for ways to serve the community. And you know, that led me to, you know, finance, through the finance committee and ultimately the select board, and then also just tracking through the IT department through the computer work they did. So it's a, as I said before, non-linear path. So.
Thank you. The real question I'm supposed to ask you is, but I love your answer. How do you convey to people in the school system and the community that you want them to share their ideas and concerns with you? How do you convince them that you will seriously consider what they have to say?
So I think that's a critical piece of the work. Both internally and externally, it's critical to do a lot of listening, and I try to be a good listener and to hear what people are saying and not be in a defensive position from the beginning. So not thinking in terms of why we can't do something. So if someone offers a suggestion, it's not, well, we can't do that because blah, blah, blah. We may not be legal. That's sometimes the thing that happens, but oftentimes I think it's critical to be a good listener and be a proactive listener, and so I try to do that and try to encourage people to share ideas because I don't have a monopoly on good ideas, and so I want and need that feedback and input, and often there's lots of gaps in what I know, and so I want people who have expertise in those areas to say this would be really effective or this would be really effective. That's important to understand and then leverage that to move in that direction, and of course it's the vision of the school committee and the superintendent that drives the overarching direction, and you guys get feedback from your community. So how does your community come and share that information? And I've always been and continue to be very open to that feedback from the community and school committee about what is or is not important, and when we want to do it, and how do we do it, can we get there from here, and then trying to find creative solutions to that. And so I think being a good listener and trying to partner with people to figure out how to get from point A to point B if it's and not obvious and not immediately available as far as just no one's going to roll in with a big truck of cash that solves problem X generally. So it often requires some strategizing about how do we approach this. Do we leverage existing systems to be more efficient, to add additional features without compromising them too much? Do we find that something is no longer necessary, and so we can sort of shift from that to something else? So I think there's a lot of different ways to do that. I think that making sure that you're honest with people about what it is that you're trying to understand from them, and to be honest with them about listening carefully is really critical.
If you got the job as assistant superintendent, how would you proceed to learn about the culture and core values of the district? What would be your entry plan?
Well, that's a rather lengthy question.
Yeah.
So I think some of the things that I actually started looking a little bit in the last couple of days. I looked at your sort of norms, and so understanding those, looking at the existing sort of policies and handbooks that are in place for both students and staff. That's one area of climbing the learning curve that's necessary to understand culture and commitment. I think I was actually thinking about this in the hallway because I got here a little bit early. I was thinking about sort of facilities and operations. It's like you can connect with those folks and tour each building and have an understanding of what are the needs and where are those needs. I want to reach out to sort of finance folks in each of the towns to understand how they prefer to go through, what information they need, when they want it, how do they look at it, what's been process and procedure for them. I think when you think in terms of an HR process, again, looking at process and procedures that you have in place, and again, conversations with as many people as possible, probably starting with administrators and principals, not administrators, but to understand how they see their building and their environment, and then getting to know more folks out in the broader community as well. So those are the kinds of things I'm thinking about as far as getting started. But it will be important to get up similar pretty quickly, just because we're heading budget season right now, to be honest. So I'm going to have to understand what we have and what we're trying to do with what we have to shape a budget in a way that reflects the values of the community.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi, Rich Redeker, and listening to your story, I started following a similar path as yours. I did my student teaching in chemistry at University High School 5 million years ago, and then moved into technology. So speaking of technology, since you're in here, which ways do you think it should be used in the school system, both in administration, education, in the classroom, learning? So what are your thoughts on technology in education?
So I think that one of the things is students that are entering our system now, they're what are called digital natives as opposed to digital immigrants. In other words, they have not known a world without that. So there's a baseline of information that they kind of come in with, but it's very uneven because they're often autodidacts with regard to that. They're self-taught. So what I think we do is as educators is to try to level that playing field, make sure that everyone has skills that are necessary to be functional, appropriate, member of society in regard to technology. I think that can be integrated, literally from preschool on, and finding ways that are highly effective. I think that technology is not always the solution to some problems. Sometimes technology can be, but I think it's critical that we put the resources in place for the students as well as the staff, so they can leverage that and do the appropriate professional development so the staff can leverage those tools and know how to use them and be efficient with them. I think there's great opportunity for efficiency and there's a lot of risk out there. The internet's a wild place, and we have to be cognizant of that and how we teach our kids to be good citizens. I think the internet in particular is the greatest tool of democracy I think ever, and since the printing press basically. And that is in theory, and it levels the playing field in ways that we're still trying to wrap our heads around. And I think that's a critical piece for us as a school district, and as we work with kids, is to make sure that we try to understand that well, try to communicate, and inform those folks, those kids, and build the skills that they need, and the savvy that they need to sort out what's what. Because there's lots of information out there. I think if I hit the points that you asked before, wandered a bit there.
Excellent answer.
So that was a series of questions that we had for you. But with all the questions that we asked, do you feel that there's anything that we didn't ask that you would like to showcase?
Actually, maybe if I could pose a question to you all. One thing we didn't talk about on the operations side too much, and in my previous interview, I talked to and posed a question to the superintendent about sort of triage of work, because there's a lot of things under the title. And I was thinking about the sort of operation capital side of things, and sort of how you think about that and how you approach that. What are the things that you think have been successful around capital expenditure, and thinking about keeping, maintaining your buildings and your facilities and infrastructure in a good way. And that's critical, I think, from an IT standpoint. So if you go to a one-to-one program, how do you maintain that over time? How do you keep the roof on the building? That's what makes them sort of curious as to the ways in which you guys think about capital and plan for that and partner with the communities to do that.
I guess I'll say I'm intrigued by your IT background because and I'm relatively new to the committee in the process here, but a number of the bigger ticket capital items we've had to deal with have been IT related, like network switches and stuff. And so I'm intrigued. I'm wondering if the combination of your experiences might prove to be helpful guidance, because I can only imagine there's going to be more big ticket IT items that we're going to need to deal with. As a regional school district, the high school that we're in right now is owned by the school district, and so capital expenses need to be approved by both towns, although I'm trying to get some acceptance on the thought that we might also use some E&D money, if there is any, towards the regional district capital expenses for the high school. But in regards to the buildings that are in the towns, there's one building in Hamden, and how many more buildings in Wilbraham? 3? Stony Hill, 3, and Sewell, right. So 3 buildings in Wilbraham. Those individual towns take care of the capital needs for those buildings, and I'm more familiar with the town of Wilbraham's process because, like you, I spent a little time on FinCom at that town. And they have a separate capital review process for everything in the town, and they'd like us to send in what we need into that process. I don't know if that answers your question.
If I can add on to that part, I mean, this is a new building, I want to say it's 12, 13 years, right? Or somewhere in
I
there?
don't think we should be calling it a new building.
Right, we shouldn't, sorry, no, he's right, we shouldn't be calling it a new building anymore, right? It's the newest building, but we're definitely due for some upgrades, right? And the bill is coming due, and I think that everyone has over the past 14 years of this, plus of this 13, 14 years of this building, have just taken for granted that, like I said, we still call it the new building, right? And there are some things that are coming due, and that is going to be a pain point that you're going to have to deal with. But what I would like to say, and I think everyone around the table can agree with this, that with good communication, you're going to get transparency. With transparency, we're going to get trust. And a lot of that's on your shoulders. You heard a question saying, you know, make sure you get the numbers right when you're pitching something to the town. Make sure your Excel formulas are all lining up and that there's no issues before you send that information out. It's basic stuff. Everyone makes mistakes like that, right? But that is like the first point where trust can erode because, well, it's poor communication, poor transparency, and such like that, right?
Right. I'll tell a quick anecdote. A previous finance director of the town of Amherst said, and we were talking about capital projects in particular, but we were talking about this, and his general sort of viewpoint was you have to be careful about putting a number out there, regardless of what number it is, because the first one you put out is an anchor, and it sort of sets the conversation in a way that you may not be able to move it. So I always think about that with the sort of first blush of the budget is, what are the best numbers you can put out that I understand, that I can defend, that I can describe, and generally I want to make mistakes in ways that work to our favor over time, right? And describe sort of, you don't want to create a situation where you create an alarm, you don't want to be alarmist, and at the same time, you don't want to be too concerned in a way that makes it unbelievable either. So credibility is critical, and I think being very, very thoughtful about what you put into the public realm, and like I said earlier, sort of what are the weak spots in that is really important so that the dialogue can be frank and well informed. And then as it evolves, you sort of have to keep referencing back to sort of talk about that progression of information and learn more and know more about any given particular component. And that's really, really critical, especially when you talk big ticket items. But it's equally true in smaller ones. You can make a mistake in the school supplies line in one particular school. It's $1,000, and maybe it should be $1,500. That $500 is pretty easy to sort of miss, and nobody's going to fault you. But you start missing things that are in the 50, 60, 70. It starts being a person's job. It starts being whether you offer or don't offer a section in high school of something. Those kind of things are pretty critical to have right. And it's important to have there's an ongoing conversation both internally and externally around those things. But internally to understand what are kids signing up for, what are classes we're going to have to offer, what is the number of sections we can have, what are our enrollments doing, how are they trending, is that holding steady, is it not holding steady? So that's both short-term and long-term, understanding those things so we can project and plan for space needs you have, where you don't need anymore, and are leveraging your spaces as best you can, and making investments in your capital things at the right times for the right population.
To follow up on that, what if you don't have a number and the towns want to talk about it, or it's something that we have to talk about and you don't have the numbers in front of you? How do you handle that?
Well, first I try not to ever not have a number or some sense of the number, which is, it's critical. And sometimes you just haven't looked at it yet. So it's, and I think it's important to say you don't know when you don't know. And if it's like, I don't know that right. I'm going to have to go back and find that number out and get back to you. Or make an estimate for that number. But I think it's you know, it's better to say I don't know and I'll follow up than it is to make something up.
But then follow up, right?
Yeah, no, it's critical. It's absolutely critical because again, it's, you know, I don't want to get caught by putting it, whether have everything as best I can when they're going to ask for it. It's part of the conversation about entry plans to make sure to have conversations with those folks, both internal and external, about when you need what, so we can have and be on the right trajectory together. See budgets as being a very cooperative process, so that, you know, you don't want to be on the floor of town meeting trying to defend something. You know, you may need to. There are, you know, things may arise or something may come up in that way, but you'd rather not. You'd rather be in a place where you're building that support of those, you know, boards and committees that feed in and provide recommendations to the broader body of town meeting. If an individual in town meeting asks a question, you have an answer for it. So you could say, yeah, we've looked into that. We've gone with this as the reason why we're doing this at this point in time, you know, or whatever it happens to be. You know, when you get in contentious relationships with your communities, especially at town meeting, it's not a good place to be. It's and between communities too. So some of the role is about navigating the politics of the two communities individually and collectively. And that's not to say, you know, I don't mean to be disingenuous, not to overstate the case of politics, but it is important to understand the political process and the temperaments and needs and wants of the community. So you have to know who you're working with, how they work, what they need, how to make that work smoothly for the benefit of the kids, really, because that's the thing. It's like, if I don't do my work well, you know, I put you guys in an awkward spot, the school committee members, I put the superintendent in an awkward spot, and I put communities, you know, in an awkward spot about funding things or not funding things, or, you know, you supported, you didn't support, you supported, you know, that kind of, you don't, the less of that back and forth that involves disagreement is, you know, the less of that the better, because it ultimately serves the kids better to make their plans and focus on the work that they need to do to educate kids, and not about a bunch of other stuff.
Excellent, thank you.
Do you have any other questions for us?
I don't think so this time.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It was nice to meet you.
Very much.
You too.
Michelle, right on with that one, huh?
Okay, so we are going to deliberate. Would like to begin? Any comments? We just had a break. Maybe we've only just been sitting for like 30 minutes. Do you need a break? We can
No, no.
If you don't mind. Because then we're going to executive session, we can break. Any thoughts?
All right, so just want to, actually John's not here. I was part of the initial search committee, and we had amazing candidates, really amazing candidates. The two that we sent forth to this committee, there was a number one and a number two according to the initial committee, and it was really tight. I mean, they were just both positive on both candidates. John, am I able to share who the preferred candidate was from the? I know that the committee itself said it was okay. I just want to make sure that you're okay with it.
I think that my recollection was that the committee felt more comfortable with just sharing what we had identified as the strengths of each, which were different, but both strong, as I believe you were saying.
But since we only have one candidate, I mean, it was just very positive feelings. I myself, he has good answers. His resume is solid. I'm very happy with this candidate.
Well, I've interviewed a lot of people. I didn't, what he said today, I was very, very, very impressed. You guys did a heck of a job getting him to the top. And I assume the stuff I don't know about him was more when I interview people, that's their personal life, hobbies, and what makes them tick and things like that. But I assume that was all done in committee, so I was very impressed with what I saw today.
So you're ready to talk, I didn't know if you were pressing the button.
John, how do you feel? Are you comfortable?
works. Your microphone's not going on.
No, it's not. Oh, it's not up here.
Yeah. There's no sound coming out of it.
Test 1, 2, test 1, 2.
Are you comfortable
Hang on.
with this gentleman?
One more time.
Are you comfortable with what you heard?
Absolutely. And I'll say that one of the parts that I do that the whole committee doesn't do is when we have identified finalists conduct background checks. And so one of the things that, and I obviously am not going to talk about background checks, but I will say that one of the things I look at is whether other folks describe the individual in the way in which the person appears themselves, and it was highly congruent. So I think what you saw tonight from the people who know him best is what you're going to get.
I'll go over that. If you look at the recommendations that came, if you look at the dates of the recommendation, right? October 31st, 2024, November 1st, 2024. I thought there was more before.
There's 3 there.
There's 3 there.
Back to back.
You're back to back.
Oh, and then, yeah, there you go, October 31st, 2024. I mean, they're all recent, updated, and I think this was the only candidate that was as such that it's like they got these recommendations for this job, rather than one from 5 years ago, one from 3 years ago, and stuff like that.
I was encouraged, intrigued, and I'm excited about about what he brings to the table with his background. So the IT knowledge, because obviously those are part of the capital expenditures that we're looking at and working with and in need of. His business experience, his superintendent experience is helpful. He felt authentic and honest. What he spoke about as far as budgeting, being able to forecast his strategies, the fact that he's a proactive listener, the fact that he sounds like he's a collaborative, someone that is collaborative and likes to partner. And I like the fact that not only does he have regional school experience, he does have an understanding of the way that municipalities work. He's been part of the finance committee and the select board, so I think he brings a really great experience and perspective to the table and is able to tackle, kind of all the things that we're dealing with, especially, he'll be coming in, I would imagine, in January while we're, kind of in the thick of it. So I think that will be really helpful. So he would be a great addition to our strong team.
You're here.
I particularly liked his answer to the first question, and I did it just because I wanted to hear more about who he was, and in an easy way to answer it. The other thing that I really liked, that because I only had 2 questions, so I had to have something that was right, was I would have asked him about his coaching of football and baseball, I think it was. It seems to me that he wouldn't have put that in unless he's actually doing it. And I think getting well-rounded people who enjoy life, which he seems to do, and he certainly has the qualifications in terms of education and experience. I liked it.
Just as a quick, you just mentioned that he was the interim superintendent. I believe that was from what I gathered, that was something that he stepped up to help the community. It wasn't like, oh yeah, this is where I want my job to go. It was we need somebody, I will do it for the community. And that had a really big impact on me as well.
That's correct. In fact, there were 2 times in Amherst
Yeah.
when they were without a superintendent, and both times the committee turned it down.
The only thing sometimes I would ask is, I assume he lives in Amherst, because he's on the town committee and all those other things, is why you want to drive 40 minutes each way, each day, through snow. Possibly.
Yeah, I want to drive 40 minutes each way.
I
As opposed to staying up in Amherst.
Just wondering.
Yes.
think there'll be an opportunity to commute with friends.
Yes.
Perhaps one of the electric buses can run up there.
Does anyone have anything else they would like to add?
I was going to make the motion that we authorize the superintendent to enter into negotiations with this gentleman.
Second.
Okay, questions or discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. All right.
If I just may take a quick second to, we had 11 people around the table interviewing the different candidates and coming and meeting with long hours. I'll be reaching out to all of them to thank them for this, but there were 2 things that struck me. One was, it was an amazing cross-section of our community, very inclusive, and everyone around the table was so respectful to everyone else around the table. It was one of my most positive experiences having anything to do with the school committee and stuff like that. It was just so really, really wonderful. And that 11 people really thoughtfully did the hard work beforehand, and I think they'll be very happy with the vote that we took here today. So thank you.
Here, your committee did a great job.
And the superintendent will be in touch with Doug. So with that, thank you for being here this evening. We do have a need for executive session pursuant to Mass General Law. See Chapter 30A, Section 21A, to conduct strategy sessions and preparations for negotiations with non-union personnel, or to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel. Chosen candidate for the position of Assistant Superintendent for Finance, Operations, and Human Resources. Executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, see Chapter 30A, Section 21A, 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with HWEA or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares. HWEA Unit A and C contracts. Executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, see Chapter 30A, Section 21A, 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation, MIAA appeal, if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the collective bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares. MIAA appeal. We will be adjourning from executive session and will not be returning to open session.
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we'll do a roll call vote to move to executive session. Tim?
Aye.
Cheryl?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Lisa?
Aye.
Rich?
Aye.
Mike?
Yep.
And myself, aye. We are moving to executive session, 7:25. Thank you.